In section 9.2, we're going to be learning how to simplify square roots. So what if we have a radicand that we can't take a perfect square root of? So we have the square root of 80 and the square root of 147. So if you type that in a calculator and try to get a square root, it's going to be some really horrible decimal that we would call irrational, which is going to keep going. We can't get a perfect square root. But we can simplify it. So this is where we want to make sure that we know our list of perfect squares. So 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 5 times 5 is 25, 8 times 8 is 64. So I kind of have them listed here. And what we want to do is see if any of these numbers that we have right here will go into the 80 and the 147. So what we're going to do is kind of take this 80 and split it up into a factor pair that when we multiply them, it would equal 80. Okay, so what I'm going to do, we're still going to keep our square root symbol. And instead of having 80, what I'm going to do is have 16 times 5. Because 16 is a perfect square, and I can take the square root of that. So 16 times 5 equals 80. So now what we can do is go ahead and take the actual square root of the 16. So the square root of 16 is going to be 4. And then what's going to be left over under the radical sign? Well, we are going to have a 5 left over. We can't take the perfect square root of 5, and we're not going to worry about putting in that horrible decimal. So we're just going to leave it. The simplest way to write it would be the square root of 5. So again, all we did was find a factor pair of 80 where one of those numbers in that factor pair is a perfect square that we can take the perfect square root of. So let's go ahead and try the same thing with 147. So in 147, if you have a calculator at home, you can go ahead and do 147 divided by 9 or 25 or whatever, but you're going to find out that 49 is a factor pair of 147. So what I'm going to do is rewrite this as 49 times 3. So 49 times 3 equals 147. So these are the same problem. It's the same expression, just written a little bit differently. And the reason why we do that is because we can take the perfect square root of 49. The perfect square root of 49 is 7. So we can pull that out front because we can take the perfect square root of it. And what's left underneath the radical sign? A 3. And again, we can't take a perfect square root of 3. It's going to be this really long decimal. So this is the simplest way to write it. So 4 square root 5, 7 square root 3. So again, if you see a big number or any number that doesn't have a perfect square root, see if it has a factor pair where one of those numbers is a perfect square, and then you can simplify it that way.